Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, I promised you a treat, and we really have one. I'm joined today by a scientist whose impact is impossible to measure. Not only does he deal with climate, but with nuclear arms and energy, with the very way science is conducted and the international structures that both support it and allow its discoveries to be used by humanity. Dr. John Holdren is a research professor in Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, co-director of the Science, Technology, and Public Policy program there. He served as President Obama's science advisor and the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He's a member of the National Academy of Sciences, as well as of similar prestigious academies, both in the U.S. and in other countries. Let's see, he's won a MacArthur Genius Grant. And oh yeah, he led an organization that won a Nobel Peace Prize. So this is a remarkable man, and I am deeply honored to be joined by him today. Dr. Holdren, thank you.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I am grateful, but in a way I'm curious. You are such a busy and impactful guy, and I've wondered whether your decision to come on a radio show in Chicago might indicate something about your concern about the nature of the threats we face today.
Absolutely. I'm spending a lot of time doing interviews and writing op-eds to call attention to the wide array of risks that we face today, including many that have grown markedly in the last year.
Well, I have my own list, but I'd love to just know what keeps you up at night.
Well, it is a long list. I am dismayed by the Trump administration's attacks on science, on facts, on data, on fact-based decision-making, and on the public's ability to know. The reality is that much of our economic prosperity, our public health, our environmental quality, and our national security all depend on the strength of our science and technology. And in the short year that he's been president, Trump has done much to undermine the foundations of science and technology strength in the United States. And it's going to take a long time after Trump is gone to fill all the gaps, to remedy all the deficiencies that he's been busy creating. A second problem that keeps me awake at night, of course, is the climate change challenge. And again, I'm sad to say that the actions of the Trump administration have been undoing and undermining much of the progress that has been made in recent decades, not only in the United States, but around the world, in taking constructive action to slow the pace of global climate change and to limit its impacts. The third area, and I'll stop at three, is nuclear weapon dangers, which many of us who've been involved in nuclear weapon issues and nuclear arms control and nonproliferation over the years are concerned that the dangers in that domain are now bigger than they've ever been, except perhaps for a few days at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
First off, thank you for that. Second off, I'm going to give myself an A because those were the things that were on my list. But I had one other, which is Greenland and the Arctic. I think they're all related because the climate change is changing the nature of the Arctic, making it a place of competition. Trump's insane attacks on NATO are going to make every country decide they need their own nuclear weapons. Which making the competition up there even more dangerous. I couldn't agree with you more. It's just this terrifying set of events in 1 year that he's unleashed.
But it's interesting that you mention the Arctic and Greenland. You're absolutely correct that what is going on in the Arctic is a very important part of the climate change challenge. The climate change challenge is an important part of the international security challenge. And the threats to our NATO alliance that have been created by Trump's stance on Greenland, possibly trying to annex it, even possibly using force, are all intertwined. One of the projects that I co-direct at Harvard is a project called the Arctic Initiative, which is focused precisely on the impacts of rapid climate change in the Arctic, on people, on ecosystems, on communities, on infrastructure, on international relations. The Arctic, of course, is a region in which 8 countries own territory or territorial waters. One of those countries is Russia. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has largely ended the 8-nation character of collaboration under the Arctic Council on Arctic issues, on problems of environment, of fisheries, of conservation. There was a really terrific history of international cooperation across all the Arctic nations up until the time that Russia invaded Ukraine, which of course has many other catastrophic consequences. But you're absolutely correct when you say these issues are all connected. They are being made worse in substantial part by the current administration in Washington, D.C.
And I don't see how any of that, if you change your frame and you say, look, I want to talk about American competitiveness, right? This, like, let's have the best economy in the world. I don't see how any of these decisions achieves that. In fact, this decision on climate, that we should no longer, getting rid of the endangerment finding, is going to make it much harder for us to compete internationally.
Well, you're absolutely right again. I'm not sure you need me in the interview. You could make this case yourself. You're doing a great job. No, really, you're doing a great job. The fact is that American competitiveness is at risk. It's at risk from many of the things that Trump has done to undermine our universities, to slash federal investments in research and development, to slash federal investments in the development of vaccines, to undermine the capacity of the pipeline that produces science and technology talent, to maintain that flow. All of that has been at risk in the Trump administration, and the latest and in some respects largest development has been the reckless termination of the endangerment finding of 2009, which was the basis of the EPA's ability to regulate the emissions of carbon dioxide and methane that are driving global climate change. That is going to be damaging not just environmentally, it's going to be damaging in terms of public health, and it's going to be damaging in terms of U.S. competitiveness. Trump has been handing to China the global leadership on climate change, and that leadership includes the development of clean and efficient energy technologies in which China is already becoming or already is the world leader. China is manufacturing the largest share of the world's photovoltaic cells that drive solar power plants. It's been leading world manufacturing of wind turbines, a technology that Trump particularly despises. Trump has been trying to stop even wind projects that were already permitted and underway in the United States, which again is a mind-boggling dereliction of duty in terms of maintaining U.S. leadership in the world and U.S. competitiveness economically. He's putting all of his eggs in the energy domain into the fossil fuel basket, which, while fossil fuels remain an important part of the world's energy supply and U.S. energy supply, we need to make the share of fossil fuels a declining factor over time if we are to master the climate change challenge, if we are to provide the energy and the energy services that people need in ways that don't wreck the climate. So Trump is going in exactly the wrong direction, both in energy policy and in climate policy, and at the same time undermining U.S. Economic competitiveness.
During that that answer, you also talked about the damages to public health, and I mean, you have thoughts about the way this administration looks at things like vaccines and what we've done in the public health realm, the damage of getting rid of PEPFAR and things like that?
Absolutely. And again, tragically, the damage is not even confined to the United States. You know, one of the first things that happened in the Trump administration under the ill-fated Department of Government Efficiency was they canceled USAID. The cancellation of USAID all by itself has produced enormous needless suffering, needless illness, needless premature deaths in the most vulnerable populations in the world because of the cutoff of the medical care and health assistance that USAID provided to many of the poorest countries in the world. Again, it's bad enough for Trump's interventions with the help of his Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. They are not only undermining the health care of Americans, they're undermining health care in many other places around the world. The United States is withdrawing, or already has withdrawn, from a great many of the international organizations that pursue public health, that pursue international security, that pursue solutions to climate change. And the result is that we are damaging not just this country, but we are damaging many others as well. And we're going to get the blame for it. We're already dropping in popularity around the world. I was just in Italy and then in England for a substantial chunk of time in January. And I can tell you that in my interactions with people gathered at meetings in those countries, gathered from around the world, the United States has got a big black eye already, and it's getting bigger every week.
One of the concerns about what Kennedy is doing is that they're promoting studies that no serious scientist would credit and undermining science itself. So this has, I mean, yes, he's unleashed a measles epidemic, or several of them in parts of the country. But over time, the erosion of the enterprise of science, replacing scientific, I don't want to say scientific truth. You scientists are too smart for that word. But scientific findings with political truth is an extraordinarily dangerous game.
Absolutely. And it is so pervasive. One of the conspicuous examples, of course, is the unqualified people that Trump has placed in many of the highest positions of influence and authority in the country. Again, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is completely unqualified to be the chairman of Health and Human Services. On many of the relevant issues, he's simply a quack. The president has finally appointed a new director of the National Science Foundation after being without one for many months. And the new director, for the first time in National Science Foundation history, which goes back to 1950, he's the first director with no qualifications whatever in either natural science or technology. The president has a science advisor who has no degrees in science. He has a bachelor's degree in political science. That's the first time in history that the president's science advisor has not had a PhD in natural science or engineering. It's absolutely appalling that the people he has placed in positions overseeing the national science and technology enterprise are, for the most part, unqualified, and the few who are qualified are in the extremes of views on the topics under their jurisdiction. So you have pretty close to a vacuum of competent leadership of the science and technology enterprise at the federal level, and the president is busily interfering with other aspects of the science and technology enterprise, like our great universities, like even our STEM education program, science, technology, engineering, and math education at the primary level and the secondary level. Those programs are being slashed. The ability to attract young foreign talent to study in the United States and the ability to retain those who do come and study when they're finished, all of that is in tatters under the Trump administration. The applications of foreign students to U.S. universities are declining. That decline is particularly prominent in science and technology. Many people who would have come to the United States are going instead to China, to Canada, to Singapore, to South Korea, to Europe. Many other countries are happily recruiting from people, U.S. citizens who are experts in science and technology and who are leaving the country because the circumstances here are now so unfavorable to science and technology. This is immense damage to the future.
The Cultural Revolution, cost China 35 or 40 years, and we're going through the same thing. Just hideous.
We're trying to head that way. I have to hope that the Republican members of Congress will eventually come to their senses and give priority to their oaths of office and to the well-being of their constituents instead of prioritizing the crazy wishes of their out-of-control president. We also have to hope that the courts will rein him in. It has up until now been unclear whether the court system in general would be able to do so because he's been violating so many court orders. Now we have a Supreme Court order that undercuts the president on some of his tariffs, but the president's response has immediately been both to disparage the 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court that undermined parts of his tariff policy, and has immediately announced ways to get around the intent of the Supreme Court, which was to restore to Congress its proper prerogatives in the setting of tariffs. Excuse me.
I think he gets some cover, and I want to get your views on this, from America's big tech companies and the Silicon Valley types. The Americans sort of think about them. I mean, science and technology is a vast enterprise, but of a lot of Americans, they look, to Silicon Valley and they think that's what it is. They don't see all the work that goes on in the universities. They see these big tech companies, and they seem to be helping this president engage in this. I don't understand that, and I wonder what you think of that.
Well, first of all, I would say that Silicon Valley is not homogeneous. There are different factions, different views. There are certainly some prominent tech companies that have basically bent the knee to Trump and are doing so in order to both maintain federal support for the particular domains in which they're working. One of the areas of technology that Trump does have some respect for is electronics information technology, quantum computing, artificial intelligence. As far as I can tell, in the White House science and technology operation, those are pretty much the only areas getting any attention. And of course, as a result, there are folks in Silicon Valley who are benefiting from that focus and want to continue to benefit from it. But there are many others in Silicon Valley, I think, who understand the danger that Trump represents to science and technology in this country overall, and the danger of allowing him to run roughshod over the Constitution, over the laws, over the prerogatives of Congress. And so I would not brand. I would not brand Silicon Valley as a whole.
Lesson learned. Right? You know, the media focuses on things in interesting ways, and so I am happy to hear.
And again, I don't want to minimize the danger of all too many of our business titans bending the knee to Trump and allowing or even abetting some of his more pernicious actions. Again, we see in the media folks going along with, even aiding and abetting Trump's desire to reduce access of the public to independent opinion. Anybody in the media who criticizes Trump is invariably not only disparaged by Trump, but sometimes threatened and threatened with the loss of their job.
Yep.
We're seeing changes in the top personnel at some of the major media that are very alarming, and we're seeing distinguished journalists flee like rats from a sinking ship from some of our print media, some of our electronic media. People are scared, and
it's an autocrat's playbook that's well known, well studied, documented in other countries, and now happening here. Yep.
Yeah,
hey, I want to go back to something you began with, because it was just too frightening for me to go there at the beginning. But let's talk a little bit about the increased nuclear weapons threat. How do you see that? Do you see new weapons? Do you see proliferation? Do you see increased chance of accidental use? What is it about that that's particularly, that you mentioned at the beginning, is keeping you up?
Well, it's hard to know where to start, but let me try. One major concern is that the last major nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia, which limited the size of our nuclear arsenals on both sides, lapsed a few weeks ago. That was the New START treaty. We lost the ABM treaty, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, under George W. Bush. We lost the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty not too long thereafter. And now we've lost the last nuclear weapons treaty of any sort between the United States and Russia. And that opens the possibility of a resumed nuclear arms race of the sort we had during the early years of the Cold War, although potentially even more problematic, because now China, after many years of being content with a very modest nuclear arsenal, which they determined was enough to deter any sensible adversary, China is now rapidly building up its nuclear forces and apparently aiming at parity with the United States and Russia. If we now have a three-way nuclear arms race, the potential for disaster is multiplied. And as a general rule, the more countries and the more nuclear weapons, the more countries have nuclear weapons and the more nuclear weapons they have, the more chance that there will be a misstep, a miscalculation, a mechanical failure, an escalation from a conventional conflict to nuclear use. All of that gets worse when nuclear arms competitions are unrestrained by any agreements. In my judgment, Trump had an opportunity, was actually given the opportunity by Putin to extend the New START agreement for a year, to buy time to find a way to reestablish arms control in the nuclear domain between the two countries, and perhaps engage China. It's always been difficult to get China to agree to engage. They've always said, we'll engage when your nuclear arsenals shrink to the size of ours. Since there has been no recent sign that that would happen, the Chinese apparently have decided to get to parity by increasing theirs rather than having the United States and Russia reduce theirs. That's all very dangerous. Another thing that is increasing the danger is Trump's apparent push toward isolating the United States from its commitments to other countries, threatening the viability of NATO, is causing countries in Europe to consider whether they need to get their own nuclear weapons, countries that don't. Right now, France and England have their own nuclear weapons, but Germany doesn't have nuclear weapons. Italy doesn't have nuclear weapons. Ukraine doesn't have nuclear weapons, and some people there may be regretting that they gave up the nuclear weapons on Ukrainian soil some years ago.
Scandinavia wants them. Yep.
Scandinavia is, again, I wouldn't say that they want them, but they're thinking about it.
Yeah,
this is being reconsidered. And you have to worry in Asia. You have to worry if the United States is seen as an unreliable ally by South Korea and Japan. You're going to have South Korea and Japan both thinking seriously about acquiring their own nuclear weapons. That would make the Asian domain an even bigger tinderbox than it already is. We're very fortunate.
It's terrifying.
I was going to say we're very fortunate in a way that in today's world there are still only 9 countries that possess nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And many people, including me, thought that by now there would be likely to be 20 or more countries that possess nuclear weapons. Nuclear non-proliferation has actually been quite successful in keeping the number as low as it now is. But that is now in jeopardy because, again, President Trump is causing the reliability of the U.S. nuclear umbrella to be questioned. The U.S. nuclear umbrella is what refers to what in the trade is called extended nuclear deterrence, which means the United States extends nuclear deterrence to its allies, not just to itself. So the United States guarantees that if our NATO allies are attacked with nuclear weapons, we will be prepared to respond to nuclear weapons with nuclear weapons, just as we would if our own country was attacked with nuclear arms. And when we weaken that protection, the confidence that other countries have that they are protected against nuclear attack without having their own nuclear weapons because the United States extends our nuclear umbrella to them, the world becomes a more dangerous place.
Oh, it becomes more dangerous. Even without nuclear weapons, becomes more dangerous because now the price of engaging in warfare of any kind goes down if you don't think the United States is going to be there to protect the person you attack. So I guess the whole world gets more dangerous.
It is certainly more dangerous in that respect.
Yeah.
I mean, we worry, for example, that if the United States allows Ukraine to fail in its effort to protect its territory and protect its country, if we allow Putin, for example, to claim major territorial gains in Ukraine simply by virtue of having invaded the country, that sets an example, again, that will cause our allies in NATO great concern. They're already taking steps to try to make themselves less dependent on the United States for their security. And at this point, the big question is whether the United States will essentially betray Ukraine by cutting off our supplies of military weapons with which Ukraine is trying to defend itself. Europe's already trying to figure out whether they could possibly muster enough assistance to Ukraine to replace the absence of what the United States has provided. But that's all an open question. And certainly one has to worry whether if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, that will satisfy his appetite. I think most people are afraid that it won't. That if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he will next look at the Baltics.
And then we're into an enormous war. I mean, 8 years ago.
No, it's a dangerous world. There's no question it's a dangerous world. And unfortunately, it has gotten more dangerous. Again, there were dangers before. We've been living with nuclear risks, since the 1940s, the end of the 1940s, when the Soviet Union exploded its first nuclear weapon, and we had the beginning of the nuclear arms race. By some combination of good sense and good luck, we have avoided the use of nuclear weapons in conflict again since Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, ending World War II. But we cannot count on our continued good fortune if we allow so many of the factors that determine how dangerous our world is to get worse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back. 8 years ago, Donald Trump went to the UN and talked about raining destruction on North Korea if they pursued getting a bomb. And then he went to North Korea and said, "You're my beautiful friends. I love the beautiful letters you're sending me," and legitimized their nuclear position in the world. It's all that's a kind of performative. It's not helpful.
It's performative. It's volatile. It's inconsistent. It's hypocritical. There is no coherence. There is no consistency, and apparently no morality in Trump's actions on the international stage. Again, the wonder to me is that the U.S. Congress has not come to its senses. And again, we have to thank the fact that the Republicans are in the majority in both the House and the Senate, and too many of them continue to concede that Trump's staying in office and the Republicans as a party in that way staying in power is more important than anything else, more important than their oaths, more important than the well-being of their constituents, more important than the economic competitiveness of the United States, more important than combating climate change, more important than maintaining public health. It's mind-boggling that more Republicans have not come to their senses and agreed with the Democrats that this has to be stopped. The Congress could stop it.
I think these days.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
Fight either now. So
we hope it's still possible for the Congress to stop it. Yes.
Right. So in your career, you've lobbied Congress. You've led in the administration, and now you're taking the time to talk to me and to the folks who are listening to this show and to be out in the public. I'm going to say that I'm going to tell you, if you're listening, the thing to take from Dr. Holdren spending time with us is that you have power, and you're the last ones who can do something, who will do something. And that's why it's so important to listen, learn, share what you've heard, because the immense amount of work we have to do this year.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you put it in that way, because the midterm elections coming up in November of this year are going to be immensely important. The midterm elections are an opportunity to change the composition of the Congress, to change the leadership in the House and in the Senate in ways that would assure that Trump would finally be reined in, that Congress would finally reclaim the prerogatives it is supposed to enjoy under the Constitution of the United States, which gives Congress, for example, the power of the purse. It's supposed to be Congress that decides how the taxpayers' money is spent. And the Congress is currently doing part of that job by rejecting many of Trump's most ridiculous proposals to reduce the funding of the National Science Foundation, to reduce the funding of the Office of Science in the Department of Energy, to reduce the funding of the National Institutes of Health. The Congress, in its most recent appropriations bills, has not accepted those cuts. But we need the Congress to do a lot more, and it seems, on the basis of experience until now, that the Congress is not going to do a lot more unless the leadership in the House and the Senate change. And for that to happen, we need to protect the integrity of the 2026 midterm elections, because President Trump has already made plain, and many of his acolytes have made plain, that they intend to try to interfere in the 2026 elections, try to reduce the number of people who might vote to change the composition of the Congress. And the public is going to need to be alert. They're going to need to be determined not to lose the power of the vote in November of 2026. If Trump is allowed to distort and invalidate that election, as he tried to invalidate the 2020 election, of course, as we all know, if he has better success in 2026 than he had in 2020, then all chance of Congress reining him in will be gone.
Yeah, yep. That's an ugly thought, but I think an important one to leave on. I am so appreciative of your time, not just in the present emergency and when you're out talking to the public about this, but over the years you have spent helping us do the right thing, whether it's on climate or nuclear nonproliferation, or the structure of the way science works around the world. Enormously important work for which I'm grateful, the country is grateful, and I want to say I am confident that it will survive the present emergency.
Well, I thank you for that, but I also want to say that I am grateful to you and to all the folks in the media who continue to try to convey the nature of reality and maintain the access of the public to independent information, to independent opinion, to independent analysis. That is so important. And I have to say as well that I'm far from alone among people with science experience, technology experience, government experience. There are a lot of us doing everything we can to educate the public about what is going on, to help ensure that the information needed to have a fair election is out there. And you folks on the front lines in the media are an absolutely essential part of that process.
Well, we get up every day. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I look forward to talking to you again in possibly better times.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'll be happy to do that. I continue to retain my optimism. If I didn't believe it was possible to make a difference and to get through these challenges, I'd probably just go fishing.
Yeah, and a shout out to your university for not being one that's caved. Bravo.
Thank you for that as well. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
And you. Take care.